So, MTV Decoded hasn't done anything noteworthy for a couple of weeks. Lacey Green has taken the red pill with no ill side effects, and oh, hang on, what's this? Feminist Frequency with Anita Sarkeesian has done a video on Muslims. I wonder if it'll be as informed as her video game stuff.
Is the crowd dispersed now?
No, they're still out there, but unarmed. They're just chanting, standard death to America stuff.
From True Lies to American Sniper, from 24 to Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Western media is full of images of evil brown people who need to be wiped from the earth by noble, righteous white men heroically fighting for freedom and justice. And sure, it's so commonplace by this point that maybe you don't even bat an eye at old-fashioned American Islamophobia in our media.
Oh, this is going to be a tiresome video to plod through. 16 minutes, Anita. Haven't you heard of the word brevity before? Okay, so American media is responsible for making brown people look bad, are they? Well, firstly, True Lies is a remake of a French film called La Totale. American Sniper is based on a true story. Call of Duty 4 also has Russian ultra-nationalists as bad guys. That's white people to you, Anita. And 24 is supposed to be an interpretation of what the West security forces have to deal with. And yes, some of them are going to be brown people.
दरिंदे समझते हो वीरान और बंजर कोनों में किस खातिर जमा हो रहे हैं
This is a hijack! Let's go! Let's go! You stupid, sit down! Nobody move! Nobody! All right. Engage hostile targets as they appear. Waste the motherfuckers!
You have killed our women and our children, bombed our cities from afar like cowards, and you dare to call us terrorists?
Here, my desert blossom. Give the change. Have you ever considered joining a harem?
Oh my God. They found me. I don't know how, but they found me.
What? Back to the Future? Even that beloved comedy classic takes a moment to toss in a few scary brown men to menace and terrorize our white heroes.
No, Anita. Back to the Future is set in 1985. The DeLorean time machine requires plutonium to operate. I'm sure you're thinking, but hey, they could have gotten that plutonium from anywhere. No, Anita. Bearing in mind you were 2 years old when that movie was released, getting hold of plutonium back in the 1980s was unlikely. So the scriptwriters opted to give a little plausible reason, i.e. getting it on the black market from a country that is a little less stringent on who they sell to. And yes, that country has brown people.
Unfortunately, we can't hop in Doc Brown's DeLorean and undo all the harmful representations of Muslims, Arabs, and Middle Easterners that have haunted our stories since, well, basically since the Crusades.
So, every negative interpretation of Muslims and Arabs is harmful, even when sometimes they're true, Anita.
But we can try to make sure history doesn't keep repeating itself. Okay, maybe that's not entirely fair. In some ways, things have changed. Once upon a time, non-white actors could hardly get any work in Hollywood at all. These days, shows like Homeland and movies like Executive Decision are providing some brown actors with ample opportunity to portray scary terrorists who get gunned down while screaming something absurd like "Death to America." It doesn't even matter if you're not actually of Middle Eastern descent. If you're vaguely brown, you can stick around to play bad guys.
Oh, are you an artist, Mr. Falcott?
No, sir. I work for a little company called Texan Oil.
Well, there is no oil here, Mr. Thurketel. Just sand.
Now sure, not every Middle Eastern character in films is a villain.
That being the case, Anita, why is it that you can admit that not every Middle Eastern character is a git, but your little montage went out of its way to show the opposite?
In the 1921 box office smash The Sheik, the dashing hero gets the girl in the end. But the Arab world of the film is presented as exotic and dangerous, and the Sheik himself, the one good heroic Arab, is played by Italian-American heartthrob Rudolph Valentino. You see, since he's not really Arab, he's allowed to get the girl in the end.
Is it too much to ask for some honesty, Anita? You're bringing up a film that is not only nearly 100 years old, but the practice of whitewashing, as it was coined by some, where a white actor is used and made up to represent and look like an ethnic character, rather than simply getting an actor of the required ethnicity, is largely a thing of the past, the notable exception being Tropic Thunder. But if anyone didn't get the joke in that movie, I'm not so sure they should have unsupervised access to the internet.
If you think this kind of racist coding to signify the difference between good Arabs and bad Arabs went away with the advent of talkies, think again. Have you ever noticed how in Disney's Aladdin, the good guy might as well be a tanned American surfer dude?
So, now Aladdin isn't brown, he's now a white-tanned surfer dude. No, Anita, let's give you a Disney example. Here is Ariel from The Little Mermaid. She's quite white. Here is Aladdin from Aladdin, and he's quite brown. So even when the character is clearly brown, because it doesn't fit in with your definition of what a brown person looks like, he's instantly actually white and tanned. Ever heard the expression, there's no winning with you?
But the bad guys look and sound a little more, Arab?
What you're failing to understand, Anita, is that you are not the target audience for Aladdin. It's aimed at kids, and if you haven't noticed, everyone in Aladdin is brown. But in the case of the Vizier character, they've made him sound more sinister, have sharper features, all so that the kids are under no illusion as to who the bad guy is. Because for some kids who are too young, they won't get the language, but they'll sure as hell get the inference from the characters, look, and body language. This is basic stuff, Anita, and yet you're picking holes in a kids' movie from over 20 years ago.
You are late.
1,000 apologies, oh patient one.
You have it then?
I had to slit a few throats, but I got it.
While Hollywood historically has sometimes given good Arab roles to non-Arab actors, it has also sometimes given not-so-good Arab and South Asian roles to white actors too, denying brown people work and decent on-screen representations in one fell swoop. It's basically the world's worst catch-22. For example, take Mr. Habib, the scheming Middle Eastern villain in Father of the Bride Part 2, who's played by Eugene Levy.
The Habibs would like to buy the house, George. It's exactly what they've been looking for.
We've lived here 18 years. I don't know if we can get every...
Denying brown people work and decent on-screen representation. Is that what the character of Mr. Habib is, Anita? Decent on-screen representation? Would the role have been particularly dignified if they featured a real Arab acting just as Eugene Levy did? Wouldn't that have simply reinforced stereotypes? I'm a little surprised at you, Anita. You're bemoaning that Mr. Habib isn't played by an Arab, but have nothing to say about how the Habib character wouldn't be seen in a positive light by you had it been an actual Arab. Which way do you want it? Oh, and Father of the Bride 2 was 22 years ago. Yay, current?
Those aren't even real words he's saying to his wife. It's just vaguely Middle Eastern sounding gibberish.
Have a hamburger.
And what's your point?
And the written equivalent of this is very common as well. Video games and TV shows constantly just toss up some squiggly text and try to pass it off as actual Arabic. Well, this one is Arabic, but it sure doesn't say what the Homeland producers wanted it to.
Considering that the majority audience for these types of entertainment, whether it be video games or TV shows or films, are going to be viewed by a Western audience, it's largely irrelevant whether or not the writing on show is actually Arabic, as most Westerners don't speak it nor write it. To the untrained eye, it passes muster. After all, I very much doubt that Homeland is the #1 show in Iran. This is beyond nitpicky, even for you, Anita.
As insidious as it is to flatten entire cultures and populations into the land of squiggly writing, there's nothing so pervasive and damaging as Hollywood's tendency to constantly portray vaguely Middle Eastern people as generic terrorists. It's so common that on screen, brown skin has practically become synonymous with bad guys who have little or no character development beyond hating America and freedom fries. Oh, thanks, Jack Bauer. What would we do without you?
I'd find it odd that a TV series like 24, that bases its themes around a counter-terrorism unit operating today, would wish to portray some Arab Muslims as terrorists. It's almost as if the show's creators have looked at the world we live in today and come to the conclusion that there are indeed some Arab Muslims that are terrorists. Sometimes, Anita, the world is as it is, not as you would wish it to be.
One of the biggest problems with this is that it erases the actual lives and cultures of Middle Eastern people and leads many Western viewers to lump all of them into the same group.
No, it doesn't, Anita. If it's your contention that those watching movies and TV shows use them as a barometer as to how they treat or think about an entire people, politely, you're an idiot. These shows are entertainment, nothing more, nothing less. No one watching True Lies or playing Call of Duty is basing their worldview on them. That's insipidly stupid, even for you.
So let's start by clarifying a few terms whose meaning has been obscured by media that paints the entire Middle East with the same broad, shallow, ignorant brush. First of all, we've done a lot of research on this, and as it turns out, words actually have meanings. Weird, right? You can't just lump Arabs and Muslims together because they're not the same thing. Arabs are a specific ethnic group, united by culture and language, and who primarily originate from Middle Eastern countries. Arab is not, repeat, not a racial category. Got it? You can be white, black, brown, and still be Arab. But not all people from the Middle East are Arab and vice versa, like, say, ethnic Persians in Iran. A Muslim is someone who practices Islam, a religion with over 1.7 billion members spanning a vast number of ethnic and cultural identities. The Muslim world actually comprises a multitude of groups that folks often forget, including Iranians, South Asians, North Africans, Indonesians, Black Americans. Islam is not confined to the Middle East, to olive-skinned people, or just people who speak Arabic.
Whilst an Arab is not necessarily a Muslim, the fact is, most of them are. So if Hollywood wants to portray Arabs as Muslims, whilst it's a generalization, it also happens to be one that is pretty accurate.
But despite the fact that Islam is a religion, not a race, it's vital for us to understand that Islamophobia is racism.
No, Anita, Islamophobia is not racism. What the word Islamophobia is a crass and lazy attempt to shut down criticism of Muslims and Islam, and thinking that shrieking Islamophobia automatically wins the debate when it isn't even a sane response to things that might be true. As you yourself have pointed out, white, Asians, blacks, pretty much anyone that wants to become a Muslim can do so, so race literally plays no part in anyone's dislike of Muslims or Islam as an ideology. It literally is impossible to be racist to a Muslim if your reason for your dislike is solely to do with their religious beliefs and nothing to do with the colour of their skin. It is of course possible to be bigoted towards a Muslim, but no matter how much you wish it were so, racism is attached to the perceived race of people, not their religious beliefs. I have no clue why this is such a difficult concept to grasp. Well, let's clarify that, shall we? It's not a difficult concept at all, but people like Anita Sarkeesian are determined to have a dislike of Muslims and Islam seen as racism because they know that if they can successfully do that, They are hoping that, as racism is seen as a social stigma, so it goes that Islamophobia and criticising Islam and Muslims will also be seen as a stigma, and that then saves them the hassle of forming an argument of merit or intelligence. Way to go, Anita.
If you've been paying attention this far, you might be asking yourself, if Islam isn't a race, then how can Islamophobia be racism? The answer lies in another ism, one many Westerners aren't particularly familiar with. That's Orientalism. In short, the term Orientalism refers to how, for hundreds of years, Western artistic and academic history has perpetuated an ignorant and prejudiced view of the East. A view rooted in the idea of Western culture as inherently more advanced and enlightened, and Eastern culture as inherently more ignorant, irrational, primitive, and often highly sexualized. Again, Muslims come from many different races and span a myriad of cultural identities.
Holy shit, Anita, you just said a load of stuff and words, but in the context of what you were saying before, you might as well have read out the recipe for pancakes. Would have been a bit more useful and a bit more honest. Let's consider your leap of faith, shall we? Orientalism, style, artifacts or traits considered characteristic of the peoples and cultures of Asia. Islamophobia, dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. How the fuck are those two descriptions symbolically the same? There is no suggestion that Orientalism is a dislike or prejudice against Asians, and it has very little to do with religion either, rather a conglomerate of things that conjure up images of things quintessentially of the Orient, i.e. Asian. Orientalism has absolutely nothing to do with Islamophobia, certainly didn't give rise to it, and your inclusion of it just highlights you know as much about this topic as you do video games.
In fact, the former president of the Islamic Society of North America is a white woman, Dr. Ingrid Mattson.
This is what irks me about you, Anita, a self-proclaimed third-wave feminist defending Islam. It's fantastic that a white woman headed up the Islamic Society of North America, but where's your feminist fury? If you were to be discussing the Islamic Society of Saudi Arabia, not only would it resolutely not be a woman, you certainly wouldn't know what her bloody face looks like. Why is it that you're content to moan about the imagined ills befalling women in the Western world, but are stone-faced silent on the plight of actual victims in Muslim countries in the Middle East, where Saudi women would literally be killed or jailed if they enjoyed half the rights and freedoms that you do? Where's your feminist indignation for Muslim women in the Middle East, Anita? And here you are, defending a religion and some of its adherents that absolutely would destroy the freedoms you enjoy. You're a tiresome coward, Anita.
But let's be real, nobody who spreads the hate of Islam is talking about white ladies. Western media has contributed to a level of ignorance so great that for many people it has resulted in equating Islam with scary brown people, particularly scary brown men from the Middle East. It's been so effective that most of you probably didn't even know that this man isn't Muslim, he's Sikh.
Actually, my first clue that he wasn't a Muslim was his turban wasn't big enough to conceal a bomb. It's a joke, Anita. Cool your tits down. You've been watching too many Francesca Ramsey's MTV Decoded videos, Anita, if you think that's going to catch anyone out. Either that or you underestimate your audience too much. Hang on. Didn't your audience give you $158,000 to do that Tropes vs. Women in Video Game series? Touche, Anita, touche! It
isn't just film and television that perpetuates this kind of ignorance. Here's comedian Kumail Nanjiani on how video games often don't put in even the absolute bare minimum of effort or research when representing the Middle East, or South Asia for that matter, which is not the same thing as the Middle East.
Okay, so the language you speak in Pakistan is Urdu. That's the name of the language you speak, Urdu. But all the street signs in Karachi and Call of Duty are in Arabic. Yeah, it's a completely different language. And I know it does not seem like a big deal. But this game took 3 years to make. If you look at it, the graphics are perfect. You can see individual hair on people's heads. When they run, they sweat. When they run, their shoelaces bounce. All they had to do was Google Pakistan language. They were literally like, what language do they speak in Pakistan? I don't care. I can't get his sideburns even.
Would this be the Call of Duty that was already banned in Pakistan along with Medal of Honor Warfighter? Because the sensitive souls in Pakistan can't keep their shit together when a fictional game series uses their country in a fictional setting. And as Anita has already pointed out, the Arabic writing in the Call of Duty series isn't even Arabic, it's just made up. Probably done like that to ensure no one gets offended. And look, someone got offended. Just can't win.
Modern films, TV shows, and games definitely perpetuate Islamophobia, but it's no exaggeration to say that ignorant representations of people from the Middle East in Western media date back for centuries.
Yeah, and we're gonna cut it there. It was hard enough going plodding through 16 plus minutes of Anita being wrong. I don't expect my subscribers to have to torture themselves further by having to cover every wrong thing Anita has said. Frankly, that's 30 minutes of your life you're never getting back. What saddens me about Anita is her unwillingness to examine properly the examples she uses. She criticises the movie The Delta Force for using scary brown people, except the lead terrorist is played by white Robert Forster, and then compounds her error by not researching that the movie is very loosely based on the terrorist hijacking of Flight TWA 847. Constantly using 20-plus year old movies in an attempt to prove a point. Just prove that she can dig up old movies, and with the True Lies example, can't even research them properly, or even comment that American Sniper is based on real events. Why do Hollywood use brown people, as she calls them, to portray Muslim terrorists? Because, like it or not, the generalization that the majority of Muslims are brown people happens to be true. What I find most irritating about Anita's line of thinking is that she thinks Hollywood and the media are saying that all brown people are Muslim terrorists, or at least alluding to it. No, Anita. What they are saying is, this group of brown people portrayed as terrorists are terrorists. We make no comment or inference on the brown people we don't portray in our movies, but these brown people that you see here are terrorists. Ever notice that all sophisticated bad guys in movies have a pronounced British accent? Do you know how many English people get pissed off with this caricature? 0. Because we're fucking adults and are mature enough to know it's not a reflection on all English-speaking men. And that's all you're meant to take from it. And why shouldn't Hollywood and the media make such connections? After all, terrorist atrocities are being carried out by brown people who are also Muslims. It is therefore correct and reasonable that portraying some terrorists as Muslims reflects the world we live in. Anita didn't have much of a clue when it came to video games and sexism, and here it's clear she can't avoid her biases when it comes to trying to defend Muslims. Flashy visuals can't mask the fact that Anita Sarkeesian is not best placed to be pontificating on this subject. Perhaps she would consider doing her next Muslim-themed video in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure the budget would stretch to a plane ticket and a burqa. Please like, dislike if you really want to. Make a comment, don't make a comment, but I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. It makes all this stuff kind of worthwhile. Bye now.